prepare to launch in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Tyler James with ComixLaunch here with you today, and I have a special live stream interview all queued up and ready to rock and roll for you this morning. So I want to welcome everybody that tunes in live, everybody that catches this replay, and I'm excited to dive into it. Before I do that, though, did want to just give a couple of plugs for a few projects that I have cooking right now. Tomorrow, this is a launch week for Comics Tribe. Tomorrow, we are launching a Halloween issue for our series Sync with John Lees, Alex Cormack. This is the Sync Deluxe Edition Halloween special. And if you go to comicstribe.com/sync, you can check that out. And what I'm excited about this one is really put an emphasis on pre-launch. And we've already have a pre-launch high for the Sync series, 465 followers. We're trying to get to 500. And if we can get to 500 before we launch, we will unlock this awesome bloody clown half sticker for all of our backers. That was designed by artist extraordinaire Will Robeson. We've already unlocked a whole bunch of really cool pre-launch follower goal. Another thing that we've been experimenting with for this campaign. And so there's like a massive bounty of cool stuff that will be in our early backers treat bag. We'll end up selling that as an add-on once the campaign is rolling for a little bit, but we're going to give it away for free as an add-on to any physical backer for the first 48 hours or thereabouts. So comicstribe.com/sync to check that out. Also, I do want to plug while I am here, helping me as always with this launch and every launch is the ComixLaunch Planner, which is out now and available. You can order yours. If you missed the Kickstarter, you can get yours over at comixlaunch.com/planner. And right now you see I'm like busy hitting the check marks because we're sort of in the 48 hours before launch mode. We'll be going live actually tomorrow. So I'm checking those boxes, making sure I'm crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and getting my things right. So if you are in need of a little bit of organization, a little bit of help for before, during, and then after the campaign, that's really what the ComixLaunch Planner has been designed for. So I hope you will check that out. And hey, there's my guest today right there. I'm glad to see he got it as is. So that brings me to the main topic for today's discussion. And it brings me to my guest. So let's get him on here. My guest today is no stranger to the show. He is the coordinator of comic art and the graphic novel minor and an assistant professor at Michigan State University. He's multiple Small Press and Alternative Comics Expo Prize winner, and he has been nominated for Ringo and Eisner Awards. And last year, he celebrated 20 years of publishing and produced an awesome and well-received and award-nominated art book showcasing his artistic pursuits over the past 20 years that have included comics, neon signs, watches, pinball machines, fancy pancakes, mirror drawings, and a whole lot more.
That's enough.
Ryan Claytor, he's here. He's here again. Professor, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really well after your very kind introduction. Thank you, Tyler, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here and chatting with you. Thank you. Appreciate
Absolutely. Well, it's good to have you back. And, I was sort of going back just to look, and I think it's been since November of 2023 was the last time we had, I was able to chat with you specifically about these art projects. And we had a really great discussion around your launch for the big One Bite at a Time hardcover that was very successful project, so many bells and whistles, so much cool stuff. But we also talked a lot about the power of celebrating milestones and putting together milestone celebrating projects. And you had a lot of great tips for artists on how to just organize yourself such that it would make doing something to commemorate the work that you've created easier when it comes time to actually turning it into a product. But I'd love for you to just start by filling me in on some of what came after that discussion. The biggest launches to date. And so whether it be production, fulfillment, the award stuff, like what was it like? What's it been like over the past couple of years related to this project after the Kickstarter?
Oh my gosh, where to even start? Yeah, that was the biggest monetary launch I've ever had, nearly $20,000. And through that, I was able to produce the biggest, most ambitious book of my entire career. As you mentioned, a ton of bells and whistles on that. And it got some critical recognition over the year it was released in 2024, Eisner and Ringo Award nominations. And so I'm just so honored and thrilled that that even came about. So I feel like I have my readers and the Kickstarter platform to thank for that, because that was a big print bill at the end of the day. Like, that
Yeah.
was a real big ask. And I don't think I could have done it without the help of readers and the Kickstarter platform. So I'm so grateful for that. But in the wake of the awards, and I toured the book in 2024 and just tried to let as many people know about it as possible. And talking with you and the ComixLaunch listeners were one of the things that I did during the course of the crowdfunding campaign. And over the course of talking about this book, there were several points at which I was sort of trying to help people who might be interested in doing something like this do it in a better way than what I did, which was basically take 5 years of my life and dedicate it to creating this book. And I wish that that book did not take me 5 years to produce. And one of the suggestions I had for people was to take sort of periodic steps to creating that. And by that, I mean, sort of treat your creative projects like quarterly taxes. So like every 3 months or so, look back over the course of 3 months and say, okay, I did project A, B, and C. Let's compile those into essentially art book pages. Take a few days or a week, and then dust your hands off for the next 3 months and be done with it. Then at the end of a year, you can potentially have something that you can share with your readers, submit to conventions that require annual proof that you've actually been producing something. Because I know as independent comic creators, that's sometimes tough to do on an annual basis. If you're doing everything yourself, an annual publication is a lot. So this was a way that I could make that happen. And I'm kind of taking my own advice at this point and creating that annual release in the form of the Elephant Eater Comics Annual Dispatch, which is live right now on Kickstarter at annualdispatch.com. So this is very much in line with my oversized hardcover art book. It's a lot of features of projects that I've been doing over the course of the past year with an emphasis on process. So it's kind of an extension of that art book. And really, I feel like I'm kind of taking your advice here, Tyler, because you always preach, listen to your audience, poll your audience, see what they think. And over the course of the past year, gaining this critical recognition for the art book and really getting a ton of critical feedback and reader feedback about how positively they felt about this publication, that was kind of the motivator for me to move forward with this annual publication. And then eventually, in another 2 decades or so, I'll be able to have these pages completed and compile a larger book in a lot less time than I did that first time.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely interested in diving in a little bit deeper on the dispatch here, because presumably that's one of those things that we get better with over time. We might not have all the energy and the and the ignorance of what's ahead of us, which can actually and sometimes be an asset.
Completely.
But we have the wisdom, right? And so this is an example of sort of putting that wisdom into play. But I want to hear just a little bit about awards, because this is something that you bring an interesting perspective at this point, because you've been on both sides of things. You've
Right.
been an Eisner judge,
Yes.
and you've been now an Eisner nominee. And I'm curious what your thoughts are first on, like, do awards for cartoonists matter? And are they something that just happen or don't happen, or is there some strategy or action that creators can take to get award-winning X, Y, and Z in front of their name, and where you come down on this topic?
Yeah, boy, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Maybe we can dedicate several episodes to this, but so taking it back to 2024, when I was an Eisner judge, that was a really interesting, fulfilling, exhausting, overwhelming process to go through. And essentially, I was one of half a dozen judges who was selected to be a part of this. And the way it worked was just if you're interested, I can sort of like pull back the veil of how the Eisner Awards work, because I think it's kind of like not publicly explicitly stated, and I think that's silly, and I'm happy to talk about it if you want.
Yeah,
But
sure.
essentially, there are literally thousands of books submitted each and every year, and there's no way that one person can go through every single one of those books in a given year. It's just not humanly possible. So what we do is we break up categories into different people. So, for example, I volunteered to read everything in humor, and it was memoir, and I think also nonfiction. There were 3 categories that I had. And so everything that came out that year, I said, okay, I'm going to read everything. And every category had at least 2 judges reading everything. So it wasn't like one judge railroaded what was going on. So over the course of several months, the judges read everything that was submitted, and then all 6 judges are flown out to San Diego, California, and put up in a hotel and trucked over to Comic-Con International headquarters every day to look at this overwhelming amount of books, this library of books that came in over the course of the year. So to start out, basically, all the judges of a particular category would get together. So me and another judge or 2 would get together and say, this is the cream of the crop that I thought rose to the top in this particular category. The other judge would say, oh, I have a lot of those, but I also think I think these should be in there. And then there's conversations about, well, I think this one was problematic because of X, Y, and Z, so we might want to consider that. And then essentially bring a top X% to the entire group of judges and say, we think this is the best of the best in this category. And that happens for every category in the Eisners. And then over the course of the next few days, we're all reading voraciously, discussing, etc. And then we come together at the end and do our votes. And that essentially creates the typically 5 nominees for each category. So sometimes there's like a tie, and we can discuss, hey, do we want to include 6 this time, or should we, have a vote off and see if it should be 5? Anyway, we create the nominees, and then our job is kind of done at that point. Then it goes out to comics professionals to vote, and our hands are off at this point. So comics professional votes for the Eisners are the ones who determine the winners. We, as judges, can also throw in our singular votes in these categories, but we're just one voice out of very many for this particular award ceremony.
Yeah.
So that was my experience in the Eisner Awards as a judge, but as a person who is submitting their work to the Eisners, this is kind of interesting because the Eisner Grand Poobah for many, many years was Jackie Estrada. And just this past July at Comic-Con International for the Eisner Awards, she announced that she was stepping down. So all that to say, Jackie Estrada asked me if I would be willing to be a judge. She said, hey, you're a professor. You've been doing comics for X number of years. I think you'd be a great fit. And I said, great. I'm just overjoyed that you would even think of me. But then I started asking a few questions and I said, hey, this particular year, I am submitting something to the Eisner Awards. Is that a conflict of interest, or can I submit and be a judge the same year? And she said, no, you cannot simultaneously submit and be a judge. You can do one or the other, but if you submitted something the year you were a judge, it would just be taken out. So I asked if there was any way I could rain check this judgeship, and she said yes. So I came back on a year where I had nothing to submit, and then submitted the following year when I had a book ready. So I have been submitting my work to the Eisners literally for 20 years at this point. Like every single publication that I've ever made, I've submitted to the Eisners. So my track record is currently, 5%? 1 out of 20 years I have had something nominated. So I don't know if I have any better idea of how to get nominated than anyone else.
But it is the sense that publishers need to submit, right? That's one of the things for the Eisners in specific, right? Or is it? But you can be a self-publisher, but
publishers, self-publishers, or individuals can submit work for the Eisners. So you don't have to be a Marvel or a DC or a Top Shelf or a Fantagraphics or, even a self-publisher. If you've had work in comics, you can submit it for any particular category in the Eisners.
But it does need to be a formal submission.
Yes, there are formal submissions. There's a submissions form that you fill out, and then you send in a physical copy as well. For the Eisners, you send in a single copy, and that's sort of passed around the judges before we get flown out if they want it. And then every physical copy is there when we're at Comic-Con headquarters. Whereas the Ringo Awards, you need to submit, I think it's 7 copies of every book you're submitting that year. And so when I was submitting A Hunter's Tale, that was a little tiny book. It was easy to toss off in a single package. When I submitted One Bite at a Time, that was a big ask. I mean,
just shipping that probably cost you $30-40
on top of having 7 $60 books just disappear. That was another thing. So it's like there's a commitment to these awards, even though those 2 awards I mentioned do not ask for monetary contributions, which I think is so silly when awards do that. Just do a pure cash grab. I have very little respect for awards that do that. So I do have a lot of respect for Eisner and Ringo Awards because they don't.
Yeah. So I mean, this is good things, but even just that little thing, like the idea that if your books don't ever get formally submitted to something, you should be under no auspices that you would potentially be included in those rewards. It's like, I think a lot of creators just think whether it be trying to pitch editors or be considered for rewards or getting on podcasts, that if they just sit back, focus only on the work, make really good work, put it out there, that all of these opportunities are just going to appear.
Not a chance. Reality
is judges from the people that are really trying to get these awards and get this recognition, that is an overwhelming amount of stuff to sift through, let alone creators that are just sitting back and making stuff but not doing anything extra in order to be considered. So
right. You really got to be out there pounding the pavement and going through the proper channels to submit your work at the very least. And I mean, it's conceivable that a judge could find some diamond in the rough that wasn't submitted and say, hey, this is something that I think should be considered. But the chances of that happening are so extraordinarily slim. And when we have it's hard to state the overwhelm of walking into Comic-Con headquarters and literally rooms, plural, of books laid out on tables, stacked up on top of each, and just trying to fathom tackling this challenge is so overwhelming. So to think, oh, in the face of that, I'm going to go pluck this book out of who knows where that was not submitted is just, it's not a very realistic possibility. So yes, go through the proper channels, submit your book as they ask.
I love that. So when we were first talking about putting together this episode, we talked about, we talked about a couple of the ideas for how to shape it and how to focus it. But one of the things that I think is kind of interesting, and something that when you've been in the game for as long as you and I have, is something that you will inevitably come face to face with, is just like this concept of like, how do you follow up some like a really big project, or you know, when you hit a new milestone or a new high point, like in a lot of areas of life, there's always like, oh, okay, well, next
What
launch
now?
gotta be even bigger, and gotta
Right.
be even bigger and better, and you know, more. And that quickly, like that kind of thinking and those kinds of expectations can actually, you know, I think really set creators back if they feel like they always have to be topping themselves with bigger and better and more, and you know, the next big thing. But where were you coming down after getting this book out, getting some great recognition? Every package is now shipped, and now it's like, okay, what's next? How was that process for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I did get those type of questions after this launch, or my past launch, for One Bite at a Time, saying basically, what's next? And maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but I took that to mean like, hey, that was pretty big. How are you going to top that? Like you said. And trying to top it did not really factor into any of my decision making and moving forward, because that was huge, and it took me 5 years to produce. And if I wait another half decade to come out with something else, I'm just going to disappear. So I don't want to do that. I want to continue making work. I want to rejoice in being creative and sharing work with people and talking about process and creativity. And so this annual dispatch was a great way for me to do that and hop back on the horse a whole lot quicker than I would have otherwise. So as far as following up my biggest launch ever and advice for folks who have a great launch and maybe are feeling some pressure about, oh gosh, I have to top that. This might be anticlimactic, but I just hope you don't feel as though every launch has to top the last. Sometimes you have projects that resonate with people more. Sometimes you have projects that resonate with you more and less with an audience. And sometimes lightning strikes in a bottle, and those both coincide with one another. But it's hard to manufacture that. So for me, I'm really just still trying to follow my passions, where my heart lies, and share that with people, and continue crossing my fingers that they come along for this ride.
Yeah. And you know, with the different brands that I've run, it's something that you kind of have to roll with, and know that there's going to be some ebbs and flows. Like last year, there was a 10th anniversary for the C is for Cthulhu, so we did a launch that had you know, a new bigger book, four new plush toys, including one that was like more elaborate than anything that we've ever done before. And as 2026 was approaching, it was like absolutely clear to me that we're not going to top we're not going to top last year.
Right.
That should not be an expectation. And sometimes you just have to be okay with it, that like not every launch is going to be the kind of thing that's going to sort of break your own personal bests or records. And yet, like, I think there's also some good in, with every launch that you do, at least even if you're not going to be growing like in the metrics of most backers or most launches, like, is there some area where you can grow, or you can try something, or you can experiment with something new? So for example, this next launch that we're doing, we're launching tomorrow for the Sync Halloween special, like, we're probably not going to top the last Sync launch, which was for a collected edition, a 3rd volume that had a new hardcover and soft cover, and unlikely that will top from a dollar perspective, but this was an opportunity to really lean into pre-launch and focus on some new pre-launch strategies. I've got the concept that I'm trying out, that I'm actually kind of really excited about, of a super secret variant cover that we're literally not showing anywhere until it arrives for backers. Like, the only way to see it is to order it, and just playing around with a few different things, and so that there's some ways that we can measure that aren't necessarily like the highest dollar amounts or the backer totals, but things that you can at least experiment with, try with, get some new results, and feel excited about. And so that sort of brings us to this the annual dispatch that you came up with. And so you're playing with some new stuff here, but what are some things that have you excited about this particular project and approach?
Yeah, boy, I want to talk about a lot of stuff you mentioned there, but as far as new stuff is concerned for this launch, I am producing this in an oversized newspaper format. This is the first time that I've ever published anything in newsprint, and I'm super excited about that because it's the largest size publication I've ever had. It's about 11 by 15 inches. That's like 25% larger than my oversized hardcover art book. So that should feature the imagery really nicely in here. And another new thing I'm trying is one of the sort of middle tier rewards has a new soft enamel pin. I've never made a soft enamel pin before, and I found this place with a lot of really great bells and whistles that I ordered from. I already have the pins in my hands, and it has this really lovely raised metal portion on the back. It's also got these deluxe locking clasps. So I don't know if you've ever had pins that have those like rubber backers, or even those butterfly backs have come off of my bags before. This I've had on for a couple months and it's not gone anywhere. And so I'm really excited about that. But at the same time, I want to touch on what you were saying in terms of like finding something new, but then also being okay with sort of pulling back a little bit if you need to. Like when I did One Bite at a Time a couple years ago, the launch was a couple years ago. I did everything in my power to let everyone know about this and make it the biggest launch I could possibly do. And again, that was a lot. That took a lot of energy. And going into the next launch, I told myself for this one, look, that was a lot. I think I'm still sort of licking my wounds a little bit from that one. And you don't have to go crazy on this launch. So for me, what that meant was, yes, I'm still doing a promotional tour, but it's like a dozen stops instead of 24 stops. There's a lot of things where I'm really pulling back quite a bit. But depending upon who I talk to about that, they're like, oh, you're doing a what? You're doing a tour for this? There's 12 stops? Are you crazy? Well, yes, were this my first campaign, that would be crazy. But having published for 20 years, having done in-person and online tours quite a bit before, this was a pretty easy lift for me. And that's not a humble brag. That's just like, I've done this before, so it didn't feel quite as heavy a heavy lift. And the people who I'm talking with on the tour are mostly people that I'm familiar with, like yourself, like the Two Dimension podcast guys, like fellow artist friends. So it was a pretty easy one for me to put together. And so from the outside, it looks like, my gosh, you're still hitting this pretty darn hard. From the inside, it's feeling a lot easier than my prior campaign. So I want to just put that out there for folks to hear. It's okay to pull back a little bit. It's okay to not have your biggest, craziest launch every time.
I think that's good thing for creators to hear. And, you know, and sometimes it's for, especially for creators. And I know right now it does seem like a lot of creators, even veteran creators, who are still like launching, and the goals that they're setting are still around like maxing or where their projects tend to end up. But if that's where your goal is, and they're still, you know, and it's taking them almost the entire campaign, if not till the very last day, to hit their funding goals, there's a lot of stress around these campaigns. And so, you know, one of the things that it's tough to recognize, but also just it is a reality of crowdfunding, is that you know, setting your goal is setting your is your opportunity to weigh in on what the level of stress that you are bringing to this
That's
campaign,
exactly
and the
right.
level of difficulty. And
Yep.
so how did you come up with a goal for this one? And was, and sometimes goal setting for especially younger crowdfunders is like, it's like, hey, I got to set this for what I absolutely positively need to make this thing, and I've got to do all of my best. But for other creators, especially creators that, you know, have a full-time gig that pays the bills, and also are doing something that they could potentially, you know, they're flexible at how many they print and whether they do, you know, print to order or things like that. Like, how'd you go about setting your goal for this project?
Yeah. So just to pull back the curtain a little bit on this, facing forward on the Kickstarter page, I build this as a 32-page publication. And that's sort of the minimum viable product that you preach, right? Like that's the minimum thing I was willing to make. Behind the scenes, I've produced 48 pages for this thing. So I could produce up to that many, maybe even more if I needed to. But all that to say, to produce a 48-page publication, I would have needed probably about twice my ask for the campaign. And when I was sort of preparing this, I was thinking to myself, do I want to stress out over a $3,800 goal, or do I want to have kind of an easier go of it, hopefully, of like an $1,800 goal? And again, because I'm sort of pulling back, that was one of the ways that I tried to create a less stressful situation for myself. So yeah, I hit that $1,800 goal on day one. Excellent. Now I can release stretch goals and say, okay, if we hit another $500, we're going to go forward with another 4 pages. And we hit that on day one as well. We've been moving forward with stretch goals. We hit number 2. And so now the publication is going to be 25% larger than it was before. So with the initial 32-page promise, we now have 40 pages in this publication, and stretch goals are accruing. So the next stretch goal is going to add another 4 pages. If we hit that, it'll be 44 and then 48. So that was a way for me personally to kind of strategize less stress in my life, and at the same time also imbue this campaign with a little more excitement. Like, hey, everybody thought they were going to get this, but now they're getting more for the same price. And if more people jump in, it's just going to get better for everyone in the campaign, whether you're a past, present, or future backer.
Yeah, I think that's such a great approach, is the ability to let the campaigns evolve with the support that backers bring, as well as just make sure that you get this, be able to make it happen. And especially if one of your goals going in was, hey, you know what, my last campaign was big, it was crazy, but I don't necessarily need to bring that or recreate that entire experience,
Right.
because it was, you know, it was a big goal up front, a lot of work to get there. Obviously, you blew past it, and then also recognize that, hey, the price point on something like this, which is significantly less than your oversized hardcover. It's like it's different math that
Different
going into
beast.
it.
Yes, completely.
Yeah. What have you learned about printing on newsprint? I know my pal Ryan K. Lindsay several years back did a sort of a comic one shot on oversized newsprint, which was cool. But I'm curious what you learned about printing on newsprint and how, if at all, the format is going to affect things downstream, like fulfillment and other things.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, I found out I love it. I've got a proof in my hands right now, as a matter of fact, and it looks flippin' great. So I ordered.
Hold on. I was trying to go full screen with you, and I hit
No
the wrong
sweat.
button. There you go. There we go.
So
Cool.
I have the entire thing in my hands. It's all ready to go. And anyhow, so I'm really over the moon about how this turned out, and I can't wait to share it with people. But on top of that, I was researching newspaper printing for many months before launching this campaign, and I looked locally, I looked in state, I looked out of state, I looked overseas, and it was really rough trying to find somebody who would produce low run newspaper printing. And everyone I contacted in the States was like, hey, I've got a web press. The least we can do is like 5,000 count. And I'm like, my audience just isn't there. I don't have those numbers for it. So I cannot do that. Eventually, I found a place in the UK called Newspaper Club, and they have both offset and digital options at multiple different sizes of newspaper. And so I was researching their site for quite some time before contacting them and saying, hey, introduced myself, this is what I'm doing. And then we've been working together quite closely in the lead up to this campaign. They've just been tremendous to work with. So, on top of that, they have these online calculators that you can use to figure out exactly where the price points are going to hit. So that's what I was using when I was figuring out, okay, if I want to bump this from a 32 page to a 36 page to a 40 page publication and on the way up, then where are those price breaks that are going to make sense for me to move up? So that was super helpful for me in organizing the campaign, figuring out the funding that I would need for each of those different increments up.
Yeah. So here's something that just I noticed. One of the things that you've discussed and have included in this thing is, and we talked a little bit about it with the last launch, but your custom crafted clamshell boxes.
Yeah.
And so what have you learned making these things? And I'm also curious because the one thing that I think is a potential challenge for that newsprint approach is that, especially in our space, which is a lot of comics and things like that, is that collectors are collectors, and a lot of times our shelves are not built to store things like newsprint. I'm thinking about like who does store newsprint, like the libraries, and they've got those big old like curtain rods or whatever that they carry them on. But then I'm also like, well, Ryan, one thing that he knows how to do are these clamshell boxes, and I'm just curious if like you gave any thought to like, is there a special custom super limited clamshell box that I could make to store these things?
You read my mind, Tyler. So you are sort of projecting to what I hope will be Annual Dispatch campaign number 2. So this first campaign was me sort of putting out into the world this idea that I have, hoping that people would be interested in it. And I don't know if people are going to be interested in it until I put it out there. And it turns out there are plenty of people who are interested to make this happen. So great. That's campaign number 1. Now moving forward for campaign number 2, a year from now, yes, that is one of the challenges of this newspaper format. And that is exactly one of the awards that the rewards that I hope to produce is like a limited run of a higher tier reward of clamshell boxes that would house like, maybe 5 annual dispatches. In the meantime, I hope that collectors will still feel okay about getting this, because I'm going to be sending these out in mailers that are going to keep them nice and safe. In addition to that, I've sourced larger Mylar bags and backers that they will go into, even though they are an odd size. So in the meantime, they should be able to be kept nice and pristine if collectors want that. But at the same time, I also acknowledge that this is like a very accessible medium. It's newsprint. It's meant to be picked up and read and handled and dealt with as you wish. So I have no delusions that every backer is going to take this and keep it very pristine. But for those who are interested in keeping that and not only preserving it, but also displaying it in a nice way, I do have thoughts about that moving forward. So it's not available this campaign because I just wanted to see if the idea worked. But for next campaign, I'm definitely keeping that in mind.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's one of those things where, until our actual ideas meet the market, you don't know. But sometimes when you put stuff out there and you see what the response is, often those things that could potentially be objections or things standing in the way of backing can lead to really clever solutions and unique things that then make this something that not only are people excited about supporting, but looking forward to with a name like Annual Dispatch. I'm curious, as you're thinking about the content pulling together for this one, but then also going forward for this to be an annual thing, like what are the kind of sort of like, and if we think about newspapers, like they are known for their sections of sports and cartoons and things like that. So like, what are some of the key like tent pole sections that you see each and every year people that support the Annual Dispatch could expect to see in there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, one of the things that I'd like to do with it is change format a little bit and have something new every time. For example, this first issue, I'm going to be in conversation with cartoonist Lucy Bellwood. She's an adventure cartoonist who's produced works like 100 Demon Dialogues and Baggy Wrinkles. She's, been aboard tall ships and sailed the open seas and is just an incredibly smart, curious, able cartoonist. And we met recently over the past year and just shared really like a kinship for cartooning and practice. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to do an interview with me for this publication. So we are, the majority of the way through that interview right now. We've been shooting questions back and forth and having a ton of fun with it. So that's going to be the end of this issue, which really dives into, I think, a lot of topics that I haven't discussed before. And so I think that'll be exciting for readers. But every subsequent issue, I'd like to have some sort of different aspect to explore. Like maybe it would be, I don't know, maybe I'm doing a continuing short story, or maybe I do an insert that reproduces my sketchbooks, or, there's all sorts of ideas that I've got for things moving forward. But as far as like, every single issue is going to have, I would say, new projects that I'm working on. So that could be comics. You might get like previews of books to come, or also other projects that I'm working on. Like one of the things I do in my downtime is cross stitching. And so like my wife and I will sit down to watch a show at night together, and instead of just sitting around, I'll pick up something and work on a project. So like this one, I have this gigantic 30,000 stitch project that recreates the stage select scene for Mega Man 2. Like I'm a big gamer. Okay. And so this took me 2.5 years to create, and I'm already working on subsequent projects that will be featured in Annual Update number 2. So I'd say cross stitch because that's kind of a constant for me. But as far as other projects, it kind of depends on what comes my way. Like I've got neon signs that I've designed over the past year, but so far I've not designed neon signs since I've created this publication. So we'll see if any come about. So in that way, it's a little up in the air as to what will be showcased. But cross stitch, maybe some neon, maybe some more clamshell boxes. We'll see if those come across my plate. So yeah, it sort of depends on where I'm at in terms of production with books and outside hobbies.
Yeah. No, man. I mean, I think it's a really great way to sort of continue to document your process, your journey, and uh, I love that you're having a good time putting these things together and pushing the envelope. So it looks like another great production coming from Ryan Claytor and all things Elephant Eater Comics. So I'm excited to see how this thing wraps up, and then what forms it takes going forward. But it sounds like
Thanks,
you've got a plan and you're operating. Curious, just on the other side of things, at the level of teaching comics and working with students that are early on, like I've been on the educator side of things. When I pay attention, I know that, in a lot of areas, like the onslaught of artificial intelligence has been permeating like the ranks of all sorts of work and things like that. And I'm curious what you're seeing from students, and just like how where students are today compared to maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Are you noticing any trends or any interesting things, or are there any difficulties as a professor that are just like, wow, this is new, based on what's going on in the explosions of technology and artificial intelligence and everything else?
Yeah. So far, it's been new enough where it's not affected my classes a lot, but I think there's more of an interest in seeing what's going to happen with this and trying to figure out ways to use it in both an ethical way and a way that helps augment the work rather than create it for you. So with my classes, I have specific enough assignments where it's pretty obvious if the students are doing it themselves or if they're not. And there's also ample time in class where I'm coming around and talking with them individually and seeing them over the course of their process of making these comics. So again, all that helps me to understand how they are creating this and if they're creating it on their own or not. And so then we'll have conversations. But so far, it's been to my advantage to have these classes that are geared and assigned in very specific ways that don't necessarily encourage the use of AI. They're still very interested in creating things with their hands, whether that be in an analog way with ink on paper or on a tablet and using a digital method to illustrate their comics. I'm happy for them to use either or. But yeah, so far we're still working in both methods.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been obviously it seems to be something that's vastly taking over every aspect of world, but I think cartoonist sequential art and just like the raw creativity and the joy that comes from that when you're actually really in that space, I think will insulate us from a lot of what's going on there. And it is still very much, I think to the untrained eye, it can be on a quick look, you can really be wowed by some of what like AI is able to do already, and it's only going to get more potentially impressive. But then, like, the more you sort of pay attention to it, there's patterns that you can see just that keep repeating. There's, mistakes or just weird errors or things that it's something that's just really kind of stands out quickly. And so it's going to be an interesting thing to watch, because it does seem like no matter whether we want it or not,
it's
that's
here
where dollars are coming.
But from a consumer standpoint, I mean, I want human stories. I want to know how you work. I want to know how the other guy works. I want to know the internal thoughts of people besides me. And that's where AI is going to fall short. I want these like idiosyncratic stories that, illuminate the human experience. And I think a lot of us as consumers do too. So while it can put together a pretty picture, I don't know how much of a human fingerprint it's going to bring to that. And so, yes, I'm sure a lot of stuff is going to be produced, but at the end of the day, the cream is going to rise to the top. And I feel like it's sort of akin to, there was a few years back when ebooks came about and everybody said print is dead, books are done. And then, Etsy just exploded and all this handmade stuff was really at the forefront of what a lot of people wanted. And you go back in history a little further when the photograph came about. Oh, art is dead. Now we can take photographs. We don't need to make art. Decades and decades later, we're still making art. So I don't think that this is the death of comics, the death of illustration, the death of making art. I think it's another chapter in history that's going to be looked at as, a milestone, like ebooks, like photographs, like, all these things that have happened in the past. But I think we're still going to be making art moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's going to be an interesting, like you said, like this next 20 years of Elephant Eater comics are going to be interesting, just as interesting as the first 20. I'm sure. And I'm glad that you're going to be documenting it along the way. Yeah, Ryan, anything else that, this is probably the big thing for Q4 for you for 2025, but anything else coming down the pipe that you're particularly excited about or want to tease or just want to get the word out? Any appearances, any new projects or collaborations?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show again. I appreciate you putting up with me yet again. But as far as things to look forward to, I'm firmly embedded in this current campaign. So if folks could point their browser to annualdispatch.com, that's annualdispatch.com. That'll take you straight to the campaign page. I'd super appreciate that. As I mentioned, I'm also doing a tour, and I have an in-person stop on this tour as well. It's going to be in Chicago for the Pinball Expo they hold there. So I'll be at Pinball Expo October 16, 17, and 18 with the one and only copy of the Annual Dispatch that currently exists. So if you want to take a look at it and flip through everything and see essentially what you will be getting for backing this campaign, I will have it there, and it's the only public location that people can see it. So thought I'd highlight that one, but really I'm just so grateful that enough folks are interested in this publication that I'm going to be able to create my first newspaper publication. So thank you so much. Really appreciate all the help making this happen.
Now, when I come back with a big box of books from conventions, my wife will sometimes say, "Well, you're going to make some room for those by getting rid of some." But is there any danger of you coming home with a pinball machine?
There's always a danger of that. But we are on a one in, one out policy for pinball machines. We're kind of maxed out on those. So yeah, I have a feeling a pinball machine will not follow me home. But if it does, then I'll figure out which one to get rid of.
All right. Well, that's me doing that on behalf of Mrs. Claytor and the rest of the family.
She appreciates it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the project is Elephant Eater Comics Annual Dispatch. It is going to be running for the month of October, so definitely check it out and check out all things Ryan Claytor and Elephant Eater Comics. Appreciate you being here, Ryan. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
Story. I appreciate it. All right, and everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. Hope you have a great start to the week, and we can't wait to see what you all launch next. Take care, everybody.